Yeah. Okay. So we are going, and welcome back to another edition of The Doctor is In. And I'm so excited to have my guest, Rhonda and Sarah. And they are working here in Germany with an organization that helps women in prostitution exit. They have a community based program. And today we're going to talk about patient advocacy and what it means to help women interface with the healthcare system, with doctors, and all that's involved. I mean, their work is phenomenal, and I can't wait to hear. I'm very excited. You are going to learn a lot. So, a subtitle of this could be "When the Doctor is a Jerk." How do you deal with that? No, not really. But it could. But sometimes it happens. And let's be real. I'm a doctor, so I can. I can dish on my own profession. But really, sometimes it's just a matter, as you'll find out, it's a matter of doctors not really knowing how to deal with the situation, or when they have a woman in this situation in front of them. And sometimes it's ignorance, or sometimes it's just their own uncomfortableness about dealing with a patient that's a little bit atypical. So we'll get to it. And so I'll have you, Rhonda. Why don't you talk a little bit more about the situation in Germany? Why don't you just set the backdrop of the situation, and we'll get into a little bit more about how your organization is actually working with these women. But why don't you just set the table for us right now?
Okay. Many of you may already know or may not that prostitution is legal in Germany and has been for many, many, many years, um, which, yeah, so it's widely accepted here. And many women, this is their profession, but the majority of the women, it is not a profession for them. They're forced into it. There's a lot of violence that goes with it, drug abuse, as you've heard before, those kinds of stories. And it doesn't mean just because it's been in society and it's accepted, it doesn't mean that there's no stigma attached to it. That's the paradox that we have, is that it's a legal profession here with all the benefits of any profession in Germany, if you qualify for those benefits, but still stigmatized, hard to get a job, stigmatized in the going to hospitals and doctors, which we'll talk about today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And so we're talking about women who, there's some German nationals in prostitution, but a lot of the women that you're working with aren't German nationals. They're coming because of the Schengen area. They're able to come freely, but that doesn't mean they're necessarily registered. They're not registered in the system. Is that right?
I would say the majority of them
Yeah.
are not
Yeah.
registered. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's just talk about it. What is it? Patient advocacy, I'm talking about it is where we're really facilitating. Advocacy is when you're helping someone interface with the system. And in this case, it'll be the healthcare system. And what does that look like? Because you're talking, we're helping women who may not know German very well. They may not know anything about the system or their rights or anything like that. And so the advocate is really helping, speaking with them, sometimes for them, but really always at their side. And so maybe Sarah, can you just give an overview of, like, what does that mean to you? What is that? What does that look like? Or in a general sense, what is that patient advocacy? What's your role as a social worker?
I really like how you said speaking with them and for them. I think it's really both, and also the point of language, because it's a lot about cultural sensitivity. And I mean, I also don't know everything about their cultures. We work with many different cultural backgrounds, but then to be aware for that. So I have this kind of lens to always have intercultural sensitivity, and then ask, okay, how does a hospital look in your country, or how was it to go to a doctor when you were a child, and bring up that awareness in them to see, okay, maybe it looks different here, and I'm like, oh wow, that's interesting. I think that could be the same. And the other part I have experienced different in Germany. So with them already to build this bridge of, having a new perspective. And then also in the place of a hospital or at the doctor's place to bring that up so that also the doctor sees, okay, she has experienced a different setting, and to kind of build that bridge and bring up the awareness also for the doctor or the helper in the hospital. Um, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because based on their past history, coming from a different country and different system, their expectations may be wildly different than what they're about to experience. And so it's part of preparing them for even the initial visit and exploring like how was their experiences before, because as I've heard before that some of the women have been mistreated by doctors in a clinical setting, but also they've had clients, nasty clients that have been doctors or other healthcare professionals, and so that may be extremely triggering for them as well. And so exploring some of their hesitancy, because there's all kinds of barriers that women face to going to the healthcare. It's some of the past abuse, it's fear, language. Can you talk about like some of the barriers that that women might experience in actually accessing healthcare?
Totally, yeah. Fear is a huge factor of not knowing what they expect or what they will face in the hospital. I just remembered one situation when one client called me and she said that she's not feeling well and she cannot move, she cannot go to the hospital. And we came to the conclusion that it might be the best to call the ambulance so that they will pick her up. And she said, no, I think it's way too, or for a long time she didn't say why she doesn't want to. She just suffered a lot and she was like, no, I don't want to. And then I asked her, how do you imagine does it look like in that ambulance? And she described it as a super unhygienic car. Like it was nothing like an ambulance looked like in Germany. And I realized, wow, I also wouldn't like to drive with that car nowhere, not especially when I'm sick. And then I talked to her and was like, okay, we have super high standards and probably it would look different. And in the end, she didn't took the ambulance, but she was ready to go to the hospital. And that really was a moment where I realized they have different scenarios in their head.
Yeah. And so, there's fear that, we discussed languages, not knowing the system, not even knowing like how to get an appointment or when to go. For sure, when there's an emergency and going to, they could probably find a way to get to the emergency. But, what about, them, I know you have to help people access, preventive health care or for minor aches and pains, trying to help them realize that try to get to a doctor before it becomes an emergency or before it gets worse or something like that. Can you walk me through, maybe offer, some insight or some stories about how you help get them to initial visit, even when maybe they don't see the need or maybe they're really afraid or exploring some of those areas?
Mm-hmm. Like I said before, I think it's really important to talk about the past, the good and the bad experiences, to have a picture of both sides, and then to kind of get behind the motivation to find the root in them that wants to go. So building up on the good experiences in their past and to ask deeper, and also to acknowledge the resistance, to say, okay, right now you don't feel like going there, but what if you continue like this? And what happened last time when you felt like that? Did it get better? Did it get worse? And to kind of play different scenarios out. If you don't go, what happens then? If you go, and then to make them aware that it's their choice. It's not like I am talking them into going because it's sometimes really the best for them, but to really bring up the motivation in them and to show them, okay, you don't have to do anything, but
Sure.
if you want to stay healthy and not go into the bad scenario,
Yep.
then let us call together. And often that's the first step, to
Yep.
also support them in you're not alone. You
Yep.
have the choice. And
Yep.
that's alone your choice. But then you're not alone in going that way. I will be with you.
Yep.
And also to give them the space of backing out at any time, to say, okay, maybe you don't want to go now, but what if we make a call and then we get an appointment? And if you really don't feel like, you still have the chance to cancel the appointment.
Sure.
So
Sure.
it's not like they are caught. They always have the choice, and
Right.
to make them aware about their self-efficiency as well, that they are the master of their decision, really helps often. Yeah.
So,
And also to evaluate
sorry, go ahead.
what feels
No, go ahead.
to evaluate what feels easy. So maybe is it the way to go there which is hard because trains are too complicated, or maybe is it the area where the hospital is where you don't feel comfortable? Is it the fear of a male doctor, to really find what specific part makes you feel uncomfortable?
Right.
And then maybe to find solutions around that.
Of course.
Can we maybe take another train instead of a bus when you're afraid of that? Or can we go there and ask if there's a female doctor who she could talk to? So that often helps to find this little root of fear.
Sure. Yeah. And I understand that sometimes you will help them make the call, or you will make the call, like you won't do it everything for them, but you might make the call at first, like the first time, or maybe the first 2 times you make the call with them. And so you're showing them how things are done and how hopefully easy it is. And that maybe next time then they learn how to do it and they say, oh, that's how it's done. And the next time that you're empowering them to make the call themselves, or maybe next time they call, but you're with them, things like that. And then also that you're...
Yeah, that's often how we do it.
Yes, yes. And so then you're just, it's like really, it's baby steps, baby steps, baby steps, because, sometimes just making that call. I mean, I know what it's like to be in a foreign country and then I have to make a phone call, on my own, and, I don't, like, it's uncomfortable for even me. And so, I get that. And then also then you'll help them go, and then you'll actually meet them and go with them to the appointment sometime. I mean, if that's what they want, and if that's going to help them actually move forward. And then eventually, from what we've talking, then eventually you're helping them then make those steps on their own. Yeah.
It often helps when we have the second call, or when she calls, to put the speaker loud. So we both are listening, and she knows, okay, anytime when I hear the language is too complicated or the person talks too fast, I can still ask, like, could you please repeat that? Or so it's a really smooth transition. Like you say, those baby steps are super important.
Yeah. I mean, because, it's just a phone call, but still, it's a terrifying phone call to have to make that sometimes. And what I hear you saying now, and what I've heard you say before, it's just a matter of a patient advocate will slow the process down, right? And you're just making it more humane and making it, for the baby steps, and you're slowing down the process so they're not overwhelmed by the whole thing of doing that. Is that right?
Totally. And I think it's also about making it visible. I had one situation in the hospital where they said, okay, now we will take some blood. And the client just heard blood, and she was like, Sarah, we need to go. And I was like, okay, wait. we can go to the hallway, and we just drink some water, we talk about it, and we told the doctor we need some time. She didn't understand at all, because for her it was just taking some blood. She was like, okay, what's going on? So we went out and drank some water and came back, and I asked if they can show us the needle.
Yes.
And we had to deal with the client. If the needle is too big, we leave. And if it's fine, we stay. And I felt it was pretty big, so I was like, But the client was, oh, no, that's nothing. I can do that.
Yes.
So it really helped to make things visible.
Yes.
Also in the sense of another client right now, she's in an obesity program, and we have created like a timeline for her week to also make it visible, her steps, like, okay, first I do this, then I do that. And that, yeah, also supports making this complex constructs
Yeah,
simpler by, yeah.
exactly.
Mhm.
And just slowing things down concrete to making things more concrete and saying, okay, this is it. And okay, so now they're going to do this kind of exam. And as far as you know, you can say, okay, well, you're making an appointment for this. Maybe it's a female appointment with a female exam. And you can say, this is what they normally do. And try to slow it down and things like, and saying, explaining, well, this is what's, I mean, sometimes they can't even imagine what will happen. And sometimes you don't know. But as far as you can, sort of managing those expectations and saying, yeah, can we see that that was a brilliant point. Because
Have to
yep, go ahead.
I could also add that in my experience, that it's really helpful for the client if the doctor tells her beforehand every step that he or she is doing. Like, okay, now I'm going to put my hand on your stomach, and my hand is kind of cold, but and also say, I need to lift up your shirt to be able to do
Yes.
this. Is that okay? Instead of just doing it, because I
Yes.
think that immediately invokes a fear in them. But if they kind of know, like you said, Sarah, explaining more and explaining it slowly and step by step, that really helps them. Yeah, instead of the doctor just coming in and doing his or her thing and then it's over.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
I think
100.
also to make it, sorry,
No.
so to make it personal, I realize it totally helps when the doctor first comes in and says, I'm this person, I'm working here already for a long time, I have treated many people, so that it's not this abstract hierarchy of I do something, you don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
But it's more this, I'm a person, I am experienced, and we are together in this journey of treating you. That helps a lot.
Yeah,
And Sarah,
humanizes the experience. It's human to human that way. The doctor introduces him or herself and say, "Yes, I am this person and you are so and so." And
yeah.
yeah, that's wonderful.
And
Go ahead,
Sarah,
Ronnie.
you had an experience recently where a doctor was thankful that you were there to advocate for your patient. Tell us
Yeah, it
about
was
that.
interesting. I think it was yeah, we were in the hospital and we waited for a long time, and all this waiting, which is also a major hindrance for many clients, where just all the nervousness comes up. And she became, yeah, super nervous, and she moved a lot in the waiting room, and people watched at us, and we were taking walks and so on. And when we entered the room, she was at a point where she talked very loud and in an aggressive voice. And I, knowing her, knew that it's fear, that she often transforms this fear into letting it out in a more loud way. And he was just overwhelmed and didn't really know how to talk to her. And we were talking together to her what she's afraid of or why she's talking so loud. And I asked her, okay, what do you really feel like? I know you're talking loud, but we can hear you well. And then she was like, I think I'm afraid. And then the doctor said, yeah, I'm afraid too, because you're talking so loud to me. And that was kind of a breaking point where we all had to laugh, because we are all three like, okay, we're in the same place. And that broke it down.
Yeah.
And then she cracked some jokes and so on. And in the end, when we walked out, the client was already, she took a little happy dance walking out. It was really a good experience. And yeah, then the doctor came to me and he said, oh, I'm super thankful that you've been there and kind of clarified the situation in the beginning. I wouldn't have known how to handle this because it was new for him. So
Wow.
yeah, I was surprised too. And it was yeah, an interesting experience.
That's powerful. That's really powerful, really, because I mean, you've touched that doctor or that woman, actually, your client actually touched the doctor, and had the doctor then was transformed a little bit. And maybe next time, with another patient, maybe not the same circumstances, he's going to remember that and saying,
Mhm.
okay, I've been here before. Maybe this is a similar situation. That's so powerful.
Mm.
I wanted to ask, are the women you're working with in general, do they have a generally good, generally poor, generally neutral interaction with healthcare system? I mean, they talk about their fear of going to the doctor and some of those other barriers, but once they're actually there, I mean, what's your sense of the things that you've heard them say about sort of their interaction and their experiences?
Um, yeah, I think all the assumptions they have before from their home country, they yeah, have a lot of stereotypes in their head what it looks like, and to really make the first step of, okay, I acknowledge that, but maybe it's not the same.
Sure.
And you can
Okay.
tell them how it looks like, and they have to see it themselves to
Yeah.
really, yeah, to give them the freedom of, we just go into it and we go
Yeah.
out again, but you check out how how the hospital looks like, or
Sure.
yeah, if you feel good or not. And then the simple thing of direction. I mean, even I have it when I go into a hospital. There are tons of rooms, everything is white, tons of many doors, many people running around. There's this tension because
Mm.
people are sick. It's not a place where you feel comfortable.
No.
And then you go in and you have to find your way. And I think that's the first point of,
Yes.
where do I have to go? Who do I have to talk to? And to kind of normalize that
Yeah.
feeling, I realize
Yes.
helps. Go into that place, and we are both like, well, where do we have to go now?
Yeah.
To show, okay, I'm German, and it's not
Exactly.
easy. And it's
Right.
totally normal that
That's right.
when you're not speaking this language fluently and you're not used to this space, that it's even more unknown or uncomfortable. It's totally normal to, yeah, break that down and take away their inner judgment of, I
Yeah.
should or
That's right.
could. And then to normalize asking, also to
Yes.
go with them to the receptionist and say, we are here and we need this, where do we have to go, how does it work? Yeah, and to also give them space to ask further questions. And often they really have questions which are way better than mine. I'm
Yes.
like, yeah, good point. How do we figure that out later? It's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
And
great.
then also to normalize breaks, I think,
Mm.
like you say, to slow down and to ask often, because sometimes I think they don't realize that a break could help. In contrast,
Mm.
often I felt like they wanted to rush through it, like, can you please do it faster and we can leave, like this flight instinct. And to say, okay, maybe we just take a break and breathe, and maybe you call someone you feel comfortable with, and then we go back in again to bring down the nervousness level a little bit. And yeah, that helps also.
That's fantastic. Do you have anything else you want to add there, Rada, or any other stories or ideas come to mind?
I mean, I have some stories, but I
Yeah.
think they'll come in later.
Yeah, sure. Well,
And
anytime.
Sarah,
Yeah.
I do one thing, Sarah, as far as patient advocacy, have you come across um, any prejudices as you take these women who their skin's a different color, they look different, they don't speak the language? Have you had any feelings of that as you talk with the doctors or even the reception people that you first meet? Have you come across that at all?
I often experience that the people start talking to me rather than to the client. And then I'm often referring to the client and telling her, like, you know that better than I do.
Mm.
It's more I mean, they are the professionals about their pain. I cannot tell how it feels or how they cope in their day. So to, yeah, break that barrier of knowledge, or the language gives me power because I have less barriers in that field, but still to make people aware, receptionists and so on, that when they speak slow and easy language, that they have to break down their power and still talk to that person, because otherwise it's a really unhealthy dynamic that we are having a fast conversation about the client who doesn't understand it, and we are missing out on her information, which is the most important. Yeah, so often to refer back the questions to the client, even if they don't have answers in some moments, that's fine as well, but to figure it out together. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did have one really terrible experience with a client in a hospital. She was taken to the hospital, and another social worker and I went to the hospital, not with her, but after she had already been admitted, after our work was finished. And she had already been there several hours. And even just our first interaction with the nurse and the reception people about her was very bad. And when we got to the room, we were just shocked because she was not able to get up out of bed. And so they had just left her there for hours with no food. She wet her bed because she couldn't go to the bathroom. No one had checked on her for hours. And so we went to the nurse and said, you know, what's going on here? This is really bad. This is ridiculous that you're not caring for her. And her comment was, oh, you know, it's just these prostitutes and drug addicts that come in here. She can just wait. And I was just shocked because she had this, and this woman was not a drug addict. Yes, she was in prostitution, but she was not a drug addict. And so she said, I'll just be there when I can. I have other patients. And so we went and we waited and waited and waited. And then we started opening cabinets and finding bed sheets and changing her clothes for her. And I mean, in an American hospital, you'd never be able to do that. They'd probably be locked. But in this German hospital, those cabinets were open. And so we just took things into our own hands. And yeah, she was not treated well there at all.
Yeah. Well, good for you for taking charge. Now, what came of that? I mean, any formal complaints, or did you talk to supervisor, or did you just kind of let it go, or, you know, just walk us through how the follow-up of how you handle a situation like that?
Yeah, I mean, we talked, finally, we were able to talk to the doctor that was in charge. And he was also just very nonchalant, very busy, rushing through it. And, you know, yeah, nothing really came of it afterward. No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really
But then we've
unfortunate.
had really good experiences as well, like what Sarah said, of doctors who were very careful and explained things as they went along, and they were open and kind. Yeah. And I think you experience that in every country.
Sure.
Not just here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's just about being prepared for how you handle it, because also you're not only modeling how to, you know, you're interfacing with the healthcare staff and this whole system, but it's how to handle situations like that too. And where, I mean, because you're modeling a behavior that it would be so easy, man, if I was in that situation. Oh, well, I have been in situations, and I tend to lose it a lot quicker than you probably, but yeah, you're also, you know, you have to model how you're handling a difficult situation, as well as being, you know, forceful and doing what you can. But in the end, it's like, okay, well, yeah, fighting for those, you know, fighting for the rights. Now, speaking of that, did you have anything to add on that, Sarah? No. Okay. You know, I was going to, you know, there's issues about confidentiality, informed consent, or things like that. Have you had any experiences, bad or good, about having to deal with that? Because, you know, your client is the patient, you're the advocate. Often you are present with them in sometimes you're actually present there in the doctor visit, or when the doctor is going over, certain procedures. Sometimes you're not, but can you give us any, insight or experiences about how you've had to deal with this, or when maybe your client's been asked to sign something and she doesn't understand? And again, like you said, there tends to be like a rush procedure because, the hospital has to, they want your consent because they want to do this procedure or they want to do this test or something like that. Do you have anything, to offer for that, or any ideas?
In sense of confidentiality, I realized during the process, often doctors just not always explain, but often they explain and just do it instead of, okay, we could do this and then we could do this and that could help, or this helping part misses out completely. Why are we even here? It's more like, okay, this is going to happen. And to slow that down and say, okay, we have understood this, and then to talk to the client of, are you okay with this? And to go back to her that she still has the choice.
Yeah.
And I realized that calms many women down a lot, because they realize, okay, I can still go. And then they consciously make the decision many times of, no, I stay. And it's not like they have to, because they said I stay, and they said they are going through the process. And it was interesting, in one visit at the hospital, I asked that only once, because I was just like, okay, thank you for explaining that, and talk to the client. Are you okay with this? Did you understand fully what's going on? And she was like, yes. And then the doctor was like, oh yeah, actually, it's a good point. You don't even have to do that, actually. And then he started checking in every single time he explained something, if she wants to do that. Yeah. And it built up a great relationship between the client and it was the helper of the doctor. And they also had a lot of jokes in between that, because it opened up the conversation, and not only the procedure, but more this interaction of things going on in the process.
Right.
It was more people-oriented than process-oriented, I would say.
Yeah, well, what a concept in modern healthcare. To have it be oriented to the patient, that is a person. But that's often, I found that the case in, my experiences, and often asking the patient just to, when it's especially important, like, do you understand? Can you sort of summarize? Can you, what I've just said, so that I make sure that you understand what's going on, because there's this cultural boundary, expectation, there's the language barrier sometimes, or sometimes, like you just said, like you say blood, and then their brain shuts off, fear shuts off their brain, and they don't hear anything after that. And so, the doctor or the nurse might be explaining something, but they're not taking it in because they're just stuck on blood. and then she might be embarrassed or something, and just say, okay, yeah, I understand. And just say yes, to try to agree or try to get out of there as soon as possible, or just to end the situation. And so, like you said, I think it's important to understand, what they understand what's going through. I've told this story before about, I might have a patient refuse an HIV test. And so they'll tell, like, the initial interviewer, the one who's doing the voluntary counseling, giving the information, and they'll say, no, refuses test. And I'll say, so why did you refuse the test? And it was, to your point, well, I'm afraid of needles. Well, can I show you the needle? This eensy binsy tiny needle that just pricks your finger, like, oh, I can handle that. And it's just a matter of just taking the time, just to not take, of course we should take no for no, but sometimes you realize that, maybe their no is a no because they just didn't understand what was going on. And that, taking a little bit more time, as you have said, to slow the process down and to inquire and make sure, and then have them repeat back like, okay, this, I do understand what's going to be done to me or not done to me, or or sometimes I think that maybe you've realized that, oh, well, we should do this, but we don't have to do this now, because sometimes everything's like, in a hospital, everything is pressure and hyped up, and they're talking about them wanting to do a certain kind of exam or another test. And wait, perspective. Oh, you mean we're going to schedule this in 2 weeks? Oh, okay. Okay, then schedule it, and then give her some time to think about it and actually get her mind around coming back again, and just slowing it and being concrete as far as, the procedure, but as also concrete as far as time and time frame and things like that. So that's so important.
The topic of confidentiality,
Yeah.
I have had a couple of situations with our safe house of having to call the ambulance because a woman was very, very ill. And a couple of women suffered from really some serious mental health issues, but they would not give me permission to share that with the healthcare workers or the people who came with the ambulance. And so, I felt they needed to know this information about her,
Yeah.
because it would have affected their
Yes.
diagnosis or their treatment of her. But because she said, no,
Yeah.
you are not allowed to tell this. Yeah, it put me in a really difficult position.
Yeah.
And so how that ended up is she went to the hospital. She was there for several days, and they themselves recognized that she was not healthy, emotionally and mentally healthy, and called a psychiatrist and a social worker in from the hospital. And then, she was able to explain that herself. But that was a tough position for me to be in.
Right. And there's no, I just want to emphasize there's going to be a lot of situations where there's no easy answers, and it's not going to be easy at all, and it's going to be unresolved, and sometimes it just ends up a little messy. And then
we really have to abide by those wishes of the
sure.
client.
Yes, because that's your trust. That's your primary relationship. And you just pray that the doctors are smart enough to figure out what's going on. And in this case, they were. Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Because because that relationship between you and the client is very important. And the doctors, can figure it out or not, or at least not further harm her. So, yeah, that's really, really good. Maybe you can share, you've seen some women grow in this process too, right? Where they've been able, to kind of take charge or saying, oh yeah, I've got this. Rhonda, you're nodding your head. Can you share a story about
Again,
one of your women?
In our safe house, we had a woman come to us pregnant and with gestational diabetes. So she was already pretty much at high risk. And our social workers, just like Sarah talked about, walked with her through that process of first they called, and then they would put it on speakerphone, and the woman would talk with the social worker, asking, do you understand that word? Helping the person on the other side, the doctor's office, understand as well, that the woman wasn't understanding what they were saying. So advocating for her in that way. And she grew to the place where she had her baby, and then her baby had to go to pediatrician, and she grew so to the point where she was doing it all by herself at the end. And that was really good to see how she felt empowered to do that. And then to also advocate for her child.
Yes.
She, in the beginning, felt that she was the victim and someone needed to advocate for her. And through the the example that our social worker gave her and made her stronger and more empowered, then she was able to just step into that role for her child. And that
Yeah.
was really, really good to see.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that's powerful. I mean, because then you've changed the life of the mother, who's then impacting the life of her child for
Yes.
in a positive way, very positive way. That's beautiful. So I want to go back to you, and you're talking about how you see yourself as the social worker and the roles of the social worker in this. Can you talk a little bit about where you see your role as far as working with the clients, and then but also in the big picture to change system? I want you to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So during my studies in social work, that was one of the main topics of discussion and foundation of social work, where we talked a lot about the double mandate of social worker to, on one side, focus on the individual to reintegrate them into the system or society, and on the other side, to change society so that it's possible to integrate people actually, to work on both sides to bring them together. And in theory, it sounded great to me. I was like, great, let's change the system and support people. And now in practice, I realize, we work a lot with individuals and we work really people-centered. But then I often feel like I totally lack situations or possibilities and time to also change the system. It's a huge thing, but to have some ways of speaking out and speaking up for people so that structures change and we are not constantly just trying to change people or individuals. And I feel like in this hospital moments, or when we're at doctors, those are those little moments where we can speak up and we can slow down processes and kind of break their habit as well. And I think their habit might function super great with 80% of people, and 10% maybe don't speak up or don't have a social worker or anyone else who advocates for them. And maybe 5% are super tough and speak up. But to really use these places where many people come and go every day, to make them aware a little bit that it's not a mechanic process, but really a human to human interaction, like we said before. To bring this transparency in. And that's often I go out very empowered as a person and social worker as well, because I feel like, that was a great conversation. Or when this doctor came back and I realized, wow, I didn't really have this plan or vision to do anything there, but to just be with the client. But then to get this feedback that, he had a shift in his perspective as well through the client and the whole experience. And sometimes even I challenged by that. I remember a situation in a hospital where I've been waiting for a long time, and the client was talking on the phone super loud because she was nervous and she needed to talk to someone. And then she walked around a lot. In the beginning, I felt like, okay, can we please sit down and be quiet? That's the way how I have been socialized, and which is useful to some extent. But then to realize as well, okay, there were also children who were super loud, and there were moms talking with each other and so on, to create a space for that, as long as no one is seriously injured or disturbed by it, to create space to let this person be different, to have a different background, and to kind of balance that out. And the reward, because while we've been waiting, she also talked to the person at the reception, and she kind of connected to this person, because she was like, and I can leave anytime, right? It's not like you're closing this door, I can still leave. It's like, okay. But as he seemed to enjoy this conversation, it was just like, okay, it's funny. And in the end, when we went out, he kind of gave her a high five when he left because she did it. And then she was doing this little happy dance and he joined in.
Yeah.
So that was super unusual. But if she wouldn't have had this unusual behavior in the beginning,
Yep.
we wouldn't have had this great moment
That's
in the
right.
end.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And to create space for this weirdness or this
That's right.
unordinary behavior, which can also bring along a lot of beauty for other people.
Exactly. Because you just normalize that everyone is a little bit weird.
Yeah, I like that.
And you create space for other people to be a little bit weird. You create space for other people to be their own kind of weird. And to deal with the stress of having to be in a hospital waiting room. I mean, because people are dealing with stress differently and making
I'm
and
sure that
just
was
letting
not-
that
I'm
be.
sure that was not normal behavior for that reception person to do a happy dance at the end and high five. So, yeah, that's a very cool story.
So, I mean, you are changing the system one individual at a time. You know, one receptionist, one doctor, one nurse, and of course, the women that you're working with as well. So, yeah, that's beautiful. Man, do you have anything else that's popped into your mind that you want to share? I think this is a really great place to end, but I mean, I don't want to leave anything hanging that you're burning to share with people. No. Well, if you think of something later, we'll have you back on. But I do want to mention though that I do have, for those of you maybe if this is new or if you're just getting into this or if you're wondering how you can be a better patient advocate as a social worker working with women or boys or anyone in this intersection, I do have a bridge guide. It's called Bridge Between Health and You. And it's a handout that has a lot of pointers about how to get started, how to prepare your client for a hospital visit, how to help them, get empowered, how to help them manage for the first visit and then follow-up visits and prepare for those hospital visits. And so if you are interested, then please leave a comment below or email me or somehow get in touch and I'll make sure that you can get that. But now we'll just wrap up. And it's been a delight to have you guys on. You guys are brilliant. You guys are absolutely brilliant and beautiful. And I love to talk to you anytime. So thank you so much. And and if any of you have a question for Rhonda or Sarah, then you get in touch with me and I can pass the message on to them. How's that? Great? All right. Well, we'll see you around here next time the doctor is in. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.